G'day and welcome to this small presentation about the assignment tasks for the operational planning unit at the Cert 4 level. So this is BSBMGT402A. So if you've got another unit you're doing, this is not the right video to be watching. So please have a check out for the diploma level one if you need that one. So I want to actually just go through the assignment task for this unit and explain, I guess, what they mean. Sometimes they're not all that self-explanatory, so I hope this helps. So firstly, in part one, there's two options. One is to review an operational plan, and I prefer that people who are in a workplace and actually working or have access to a workplace or a community organisation that does some planning, that you review things that you're familiar with. That would be great. But if you don't have a workplace, you don't have access to a plan, then you can choose the other option, which is option B, and that's to write up your own operational plan. And I won't talk too much about option number 2, but that's the toolbox option. So that's if you've got no work experience whatsoever, you could probably use the toolbox option. Okay, so option A, review the operational plan and associated budget for your area against best practice for planning. You can use the unit notes and other resources that are attached to this unit and any other research that you do of your own, and prepare a report on its effectiveness. Please provide a copy of the plan with the report if you can. As you review the plan, consider the following key elements by analysing its comprehensiveness. Are things missing? Accuracy of estimates and practicality, it's a hard word. Does the plan reflect reality? Now, these are the points we need you to check as you write up your report. The collection and analysis of information used as a basis for developing the plan. The relevance, usefulness and method of collection. So there's a number of things mentioned in the notes and obviously within the textbook, but the most common thing is a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats analysis. So you can probably look at, okay, has there been a SWOT done or something similar? What scanning has been done about the external market and the internal strengths and weaknesses and things like that? So is there a beginning point for this plan, in other words, and has it been done thoroughly? The next point we want to consider is the relevance of the organisation's strategic plan or mission. So it needs to align with what the organisation is on about. So whether the vision and the mission, if there's one of those, that's great, or some strategic goals, or just generally accepted directions that the business or organisation is on about, how does this plan line up with what they want to do in the longer term? The next point to consider is the KPIs, so whether they're qualitative or quantitative. So quantitative are the things that we can measure easily with numbers. We report back, you know, there's so many objects have been made, they've met this particular tolerance, we can measure those sort of things. But qualitative are more about people's opinions of quality, such as customer service and things like that. So qualitative ones are still important and they need to be measured, particularly when we're looking at the effectiveness of what we're trying to do with our operational plan. So when we're looking at this in the report, do they truly measure the desired outcomes of the plan? So in particular, the finance and budgetary performance, the quantity of the output, the quality of the output, the meeting of timelines, and maintaining safety standards. So they're the things we need to look at particularly. Another point within your report needs to be about the quality of contingency planning. Sometimes there aren't any contingency plans, but what contingency plans have been considered, or are the things in place already that we can just take for granted, I suppose. And that might be a pool of casual staff who are trained and ready to be brought in at short notice. That meets a contingency of staff shortages. It might be alternative suppliers in case a supplier suddenly loses a lot of stock or for some reason is delayed on getting things to us. So that's contingency planning. The next point is the effectiveness of consultation with stakeholders. Well, it sounds highfalutin, but yeah, was a discussion with all of the people involved in the plan and people may be affected by the plan about the actual plan. So do we feel like we own it, in other words? And then lastly, the planning to acquire resources needed to implement the operational plan. So what planning of resource acquisition is in there. How do we get the energy we need? How do we get the materials we need? How do we get the services we need? How do we get the people that we need? So is there a plan for acquiring those resources at the same time? So if any of those key elements are missing from the plan, then I need an outline that you believe should have been addressed. So a report on the actual plan, its effectiveness, how it works in reality, covering all of those points. So that's option A. Option B then is developing your own operational plan. Obviously this is a bit of an onerous task, so we've watered it down a little bit, but you'll still experience all the elements that we just discussed as you put this other plan together. So this is if you haven't got access to a plan and you need to just have a bit of practice of putting one together. So basically you're guided to come up with a task or a thing to do within your organisation or work group there's going to be a benefit. Maybe it's something you always wanted to do but never actually got round to. Well, here's a chance to actually plan for it at least, so you can feel pretty good about that. So it has to have at least 4 tasks within it. So say we want to put together a new marketing campaign, and we're going to have an operational plan to do that. There needs to be 4 tasks at least within that plan, or within whatever it is you've chosen to do. It might be to run a festival or run an event, or it could be anything. But at least 4 tasks. So it might be recruiting people and inducting people, making brochures and posters, acquiring the funding that you need from some grant or some other sponsorship deal, things like that, so that you can actually identify the tasks. And then with each of those tasks, we're looking for at least 2 KPIs, so things that you can measure that will tell you and other people that you're actually on track to finish the plan and do it well. So then the discussion of the key elements has to be with the plan, so as well as presenting the plan, and that might be in a table or a Gantt chart, say, or something like that. We still need you to look at all of the information, the same as in that option A. So the collection of relevance of the SWOT that you might do. If it is a SWOT, it can be something else. But obviously the research that goes behind the beginning point of the plan. And once again, the relevance to the organisation's strategic direction, the KPIs that you've chosen, whether they're going to cover all the things as we mentioned before, whether you've got some contingency plans in there, we'll probably need at least one, the consultation that was involved in the acquiring of the resources to implement the plan. So there's a format a basic format that I've developed that you can use as a guide if you like, to make sure you don't miss anything out in your plan. And it also leads to a budget. So the budget needs to show, well, sometimes income, but a lot of times what we do is you're sort of monitoring costs rather than income, but sometimes it's income as well. Look at the costs, the monthly expenditures, and then leave a column for the actual expenditures and a variance column, so the difference between the planned and the actual, so that you can make decisions about that. Okay, so that's part 1, all to do with operational planning, putting it together or reviewing it. So part 2 now has a concentration on human sort of resources, I guess. So the first part is about reviewing the induction process and the procedures that people use to be inducted. And we want you to check out the last few people that you work with who are fairly recent employees, what they thought of the inductions. That's the qualitative sort of stuff. And then the quantitative things is, did they see a certain number of people? Was it a certain number of days? Were they assessed at any time and given feedback, that sort of stuff. So we're looking for any discrepancies in what's laid down in the procedures and what actually happened, but we also want to look at, okay, is it the most effective way to do it? Did they have a buddy or a mentor? Did that continue? If that's not the case, then maybe you can make a comment on it. So we're looking for some recommendations about how to improve the process. So why are we looking at people when we're talking about planning? Because the people actually implement the plan, don't they? So we want to get people who can be recruited very efficiently, they hit the ground with the skills they're required, and then they're trained immediately and they're monitored and they're kept on track, so that we don't waste any time and we also get the best people. That's what we're trying to do. Excuse me. Sorry about that. That's the trouble with live video, isn't it? And the next part is analyse how physical resources and services and human resources are required. So Still, that emphasis on the human resource will actually require you to do a review of the recruitment and selection procedures for your organisation, and once again make some comments about how efficient that is, whether it gives you the right people at the right time. And on the other side is the physical resources. So the nature of the resources that are required, the quantities, even the skills of the people that are needed to work within the plan. So there's a little bit in there. So that could be the raw materials, once again, the services and things like that. How are they acquired? Do we have a preferred supplier system? In other words, people have met certain criteria. We know that they'll meet guidelines for quality and timeliness and things like that. But you may not have preferred suppliers, so how do you assess the best quality and the best price, I suppose? How do you balance those things? Looking for recommendations improving those aspects of acquiring resources. Then we go on to part 3, so the last part, and this is again just in your work situation, and it's asking to summarise how operational performance is actually monitored in your work area. So that's operational performance such as meeting budget, the people performance within the plan, or within your work, and the actual quality and quantity of the outputs. So I need a summary of that in a small report covering the following points. How the information about operational performance is gathered and recorded to assess progress towards the targets. So what numerical information do we get, what feedback do we get? And that could be for people as well. What's the performance management system like? How is the information reported and to whom? So that's fairly straightforward, I hope. The timeliness and relevance of the information, in other words, is it way behind that we get, is it a long way to go since the information was gathered that we actually get it, so it's too late for us to do anything about it. So obviously the real-time gathering of information is the best if we can, but that's where you can comment about that. But also the relevance, so we're measuring a whole lot of things that don't tell us too much, which is sometimes the case. So a bit of a comment about that. The quality and analysis of the analysis and interpretation of the information obtained. So then we have the information, do people use it in a wise way? So that's obviously open to question. Identification of unsatisfactory performance together with the ability to rectify the situation. So this is from suppliers or from the people that operate within the plan, or the processes within the plan. If there's something's not going quite up to standard, then what do we do about it? What happens? What level of support do people get? What policies and procedures are in place, and do they actually help with this sort of timely intervention to try and get things back on track? And 3 more points to go within this short report. The flexibility to vary the operational plan. So this is pretty closely linked to that idea of the quality analysis and interpretation and the timeliness of the gathering the data, isn't it? Because at what point do we decide, hang on, the plan's wrong, we need to change it? It mightn't be our fault or anything, it could be other things that have impacted, but yeah, how much flexibility is there to change the plan? Second last thing is then how coaching and mentoring is used to increase productivity and safety. So we want to look at, okay, how do we ensure people are safe through coaching and mentoring, but also how do we improve processes through coaching and mentoring? And be quite clear on the difference here. Coaching is supporting someone to build skills, and that's a hands-on type thing. Whereas mentoring is hands-off. In other words, it's guiding someone, suggesting activities for them to do and what they might learn from them, and having some conversations about them, about those things, but remote from their actual work. So there's quite a difference between the two. And then the last point that we want to consider is the manageability of systems, procedures and records associated with documenting performance in accordance with the organisation's requirements. In other words, a big long sentence, it means how user-friendly is the system of recording and measuring performance. So that's a fairly straightforward question, and sometimes in some organisations a lot of gobbledygook in the procedures and things, but in the end, how useful is that? And we're asking you then to make some recommendations on any of these, how they can be improved, and identify the positions of the people or the person who'd be most appropriate to receive your recommendations. So we're actually seeing that you could be a middle manager there and say, okay, I can see that things could be improved here, but then be able to decide, well, who's the best person to approach with this information. And that is the end of that particular option for the assessment. As I mentioned earlier on, option 2 was the toolbox option. So the toolbox option, you will need the toolbox and that I can supply, and I need to go through it with you so you understand the process, so I won't discuss that now. And of course the third option for assessment was recognition, and hopefully you already considered that before you started the unit and talked to me about it. Anyway, so thanks for listening and good luck with your assignment.